It's Friday again. It's another episode of Fintech Fridays. I'm Brian View, President and COO of FinLocker, and with me is Kristin Messerli with Experiencecom. And I think everybody knows Kristin. You do the podcast and conference circuit, and I'm super excited to have you on my little show this week. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we've got all kinds of things to talk about, none of which we planned, which is the fun of this particular talk. But I'd like to start every episode asking my guests just to tell the audience what the term fintech means to you, kind of in the context of your work and personal life.
Yeah, that's fintech means to me. I mean, fintech to me is all about technology, the merge of technology and finance, and how do we use technology to improve financial services. And to me personally, I think it comes down to that, like, how am I personally contributing to improving financial services by leveraging technology?
So I know this is this is near and dear to your heart in terms of financial literacy and financial inclusion. And so kind of taking your definition there of fintech and maybe pulling it a little bit deeper, what are you seeing kind of in the mortgage space specifically from a tech perspective as it relates to, empowering consumers, both from a literacy perspective, but also a fitness and, readiness perspective?
I would say one, not enough. I obviously love what you guys are doing. And I think that we've come to such an incredible place in terms of technology and the way that we empower consumers today. I think that's that's the trend, and it's an exciting trend where we put consumers at the center of the transaction, where consumers want to be empowered to make smart decisions for themselves. And we have some of that going in financial services, but really, I think we're so far behind from where we need to be. So I think the two areas that I always talk about when it comes to fintech is empathy. So really understanding the customer and putting their diverse needs first and understanding those. And then secondly is empowerment, and how you put the consumer at the center of that transaction so that they can make the decisions for themselves.
And so when you say we're not doing enough, I want to just kind of poke a little bit at that, because I agree with you. I think there's folks out there, there's companies out there that are working on or building some solutions, but at the end of the day, in mortgage, it has to be whatever is built and created has to be embraced by the folks that are facing off with the consumer at the point of sale. And it feels like, from my seat anyway, there's a resistance, at the street level, the loan officer level, which is where a lot of the engagement's happening with consumers. Do you see a similar kind of challenge there? And if so, how do as an industry, as an enterprise, as a company, as a lender, how do you start to address that with that gap? And if you don't see it, I'd be curious what you are seeing that's kind of holding us back.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that there's so many different areas we could go with this, but one, even outside of mortgage, there's so many different apps addressing different problems, and it's really hard to pull them all together, which again is why I'm a big fan of you guys. But you think about, as a consumer, not even thinking about mortgage or the industry at all. As a consumer, when I think about getting my finances in order, I am inundated with a million different apps that solve a million different things. And, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the space. And as soon as I start digging into it, I'm like, it's a lot. And none of it connects in a lot of ways. We've started the connections with our bank account, and of course, like with Mint being the first of that whole movement. And that was a long time ago. I can't believe we haven't really progressed that much further. And it feels like so. And then when it comes to the mortgage industry in particular, yeah, you're right. The industry is still making the call, which, understandably, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, and loan officers need to really have a lot of things catering their needs. But we are I think what we'll see in the future, and this is something I talked about with Dave Savage, he was talking about how we're going to see less, like more single sign-on, like everything's going to integrate with each other, and I think that's absolutely true from both a consumer app perspective and in the industry, where things will start to come together more. But right now, it's hard to get loan officers to buy into something that's really good for the consumer. They want that, but there's a million other things they have to get done too. And so, we work with mortgage companies all the time and banks on rolling out technology, and there's only so much time, and money and resources to roll out a technology. So if you need to update your LOS, that's going to be a 6-month project, and then
that's fast.
Everything else has to get pushed. And if you want to roll out Experience.com, doesn't take very much time, but it's still an initiative that you have to think about and prioritize. And so there's all these things that are like foundational. And then we can start talking about, all right, how do we really do outreach to the consumer? And I think that a lot of these things should and could be done simultaneously. Like Experience.com, FinLocker, these types of things are not things that require, I think, all the loan officers to be, I don't know, but there's a lot of automation involved there. But I think that we need more alignment across departments and buy-in from everyone to make it happen.
So one of the perspectives I kind of have around, mortgage tech specifically, having spent my entire, adult life for the most part in mortgage originations, and then the last few years in the tech side supporting originations. While I was at a lender, I was part of the problem because I suffered from shiny object syndrome. So you see something cool that somebody demos and you're like, I want to do that. Let's do that. And you start kind of chasing that down. And to your point, there needs to be, in my opinion, there needs to be more thought around not just the tech stack in particular, but the consumer experience across that tech, and then the user experience. And the user could be a loan officer, it could be a processor, back office, again, across the stack. And you can't do them in isolation, right? Because the consumer experience may impact the loan officer experience and vice versa. And it feels like, now that I sit on the vendor side, the tech side, it is harder to, we like to think, to the right and to the left, and who do we need to be logically partnering with so that our tech can be more seamlessly implemented. And there's some cooperation, but there's not a lot across that spectrum. And I don't think it's a lack of interest in cooperating. I think it's a lack of resources and so many other priorities. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing in your new role at Experience.com, you kind of see that as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because in my role, cultural outreach, and as an independent consultant, I was working in a different capacity. And so I was helping companies adopt technology and prioritize and all that kind of stuff. So, or map out their strategy. But now with me being on the vendor side as well, I'm like, why aren't they calling me back? Like, I don't know. It's been so funny. My reps are like, welcome to the life. Yeah. But I realized like, oh yeah, I just, people have so much that they have to figure out how to prioritize, and they're not going to strategize on that with a vendor that I'm trying to get them to prioritize me, But yeah, it's really interesting being on the other side of that.
It is. It's not easy at all. Let's talk a little bit about Experience.com. I've kind of been following the platform from its early social survey days. Totally love the solution. I think it's super helpful. And for our audience, maybe that's not fully aware of what you all do, maybe just talk a little bit about what you do, who you serve, and how it helps.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we used to be known as Social Survey. And at the beginning of this year, we did a brand change to Experience.com. That was partly why I came over to the company, was because of all of the evolution of the company that was happening. But as a social survey, we were known for brand reputation. So we helped you build reviews, and we were born out of mortgage. So we do it in a hierarchy. We understand the industry of over 250 customers at this point, maybe 300 in mortgage and banking. But we have really been known for generating reviews, the post-close survey, all that kind of stuff. But now with Experience.com, and we have a new version of our platform that we've just rolled out, we have the ability to survey customers and employees at multiple touch points. So any of the moments that you interact with your customer or employee that matter to you, we collect that feedback, help you analyze and decide what to do with that feedback, and all through automation. So it might be in the middle of the process when someone finishes an application, or just a mid-process survey, check in, see how they're doing. For me, who I just bought a home not that long ago, and I left a lender in the middle of the process because I was like, this sucks here, you know, and if they'd surveyed me, maybe they'd find out why it sucked and find out how to change it in the future, and or have caught me before I left, you know. So that type of stuff I'm really excited about with the new platform. But we're also able to work with retail banks and wealth management, different areas of a bank, or wholesale servicing, different divisions of a mortgage company now, all with, again, that idea of collecting feedback. And then either we can pass it to generate reviews, do a workflow around that, or escalate complaints, or do other things with the data. Like we have a new ability now to analyze the data across demographics. So we'll look at all of your reviews or survey feedback and identify, right, on average, you might be getting a 4.5 stars, you know, across everyone, but in the single female demographic or Latino population, you're getting a lower score. So why is that? And, you know, I think that gets into some really exciting stuff for customer experience and employee experience overall.
Yeah, and hearing you kind of explain it in detail, my mind's racing back to my lender days. And I love the concept of this kind of perpetual survey, right? Mm-hmm. Too often people just do the post-close single survey, and they probably get a lot of false positives, frankly, from that, because people are coming off this emotional high of buying a home typically, right? And that they're feeling good about it, even though the process could have been maybe sucked early on. Getting to that closing, getting the keys, it's typically a happy emotional event. And if you're surveying right off of the heels of that, you're probably going to get a score that's not necessarily indicative of the entire experience. And you guys now can get real surgical for a lender and just dive into those problem areas. And they still may get a 8.9 overall, but your disclosure process at the very onset is terrible, and it's costing you. So is that what you guys are seeing, as you drill into that detail?
And I mean, post-close surveys are not listening to your customer. That's not CX, that's brand reputation, and that's important, but it's one piece of a puzzle, and it's not a big piece of CX. When you're really wanting to listen to your customer, you want to survey them after every interaction that you have with them, and be collecting feedback all along the way. With employees, you should collect feedback right after you interview them, right after they're hired, at 6 months into the hiring, so really listening at every step of the way. As you know, I was having problems with my Wi-Fi today, and I had called the company earlier today, and as soon as we were off the phone, I was like, they better survey me, because I want to give my feedback. And even if it makes me feel better as a consumer just to provide the feedback, even if nothing happens with it.
Right.
It makes us feel better because we're empowered. We know our voices were heard. We want to be contributing. We really want to make everyone better by giving our feedback. It's not, so I think it's a really valuable thing to have in place, no matter what type of company or moments you're having.
So based on what you described, which is kind of this, I call it this perpetual survey, it feels like there needs to be a pretty tight integration with Experience.com, at least at a minimum, with the piece of tech that's communicating with the consumer through the process. Is that typically inside the POS? Is that where you see most of that connection happen?
We actually usually do it through the LOS. So
Okay.
we have a really great integration with Encompass, and we integrate with a lot of other LOSs as well. We also can do just an SFTP type of upload, but we also integrate with Salesforce and have had some instances around, going through the CRM.
Yeah.
But yeah, primarily in mortgage and banking, it's been through the LOS.
Okay, makes sense. So yeah, you're triggering off of statuses, milestones, et cetera, and that's queuing the survey at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
So the pivot for social survey to Experiencecom, and then this massive pivot really from a product perspective, right? You guys I'm learning new things that you're doing, which is pretty cool. I think we're going to figure out a way for our products in tech to work together to the benefit of lenders, but I think there's a massive benefit for FinLocker as a product ourselves to learn about the user feedback through the experience. I'm excited about that. Mm-hmm. How are lenders adapting to the feedback now, right? You guys are able to provide a ton of data, and it could be overwhelming. Do you also kind of come in and wrap around some consultancy to advise them on how to read out the data and then how to create action plans to address?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting problem, and cool that you picked up on that right away. I think that I think it's amazing if a company has a BI tool already, because we can integrate with your Domo or Tableau or, Power BI, something around that to be able to illustrate that data and give you, meaningful results reporting. But I also definitely think that we should provide more of a consultancy. We have amazing customer success team members that are all, assigned to each account. We have account executives assigned to every single account. So we have a really incredible support team. But I think there's a lot more, to your point, around kind of strategizing overall. And so while they're doing that, I think that, for myself, having 10 plus years in the mortgage industry and really focused on CX consulting. Brittany Hodak works with our company, same, really extensive background in CX. And of course, Scott Harris, our CEO. There's a lot of people. Jessica Kriegel just joined and has extensive experience on the EX side. So we have a lot of people that are now providing more of that consultative feedback. But I think that we're all speaking and doing a lot in the industry, but I think that we'll continue to shape more of our professional services around that as well.
Yeah, it's just a logical extension of the data, right? And to your point, you guys have amassed this wonderful set of talent and experience, and your customers should benefit from that for sure.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I was just on a call where we're mapping out our CX journeys, and Voice of Employee is a new program that we're rolling out where we already do the employee feedback, but we've got a specific program that is going to be brand new. We're just piloting. And all of this is from everyone contributing and also from what we hear in the market. So it's right. Speaking of feedback, we built everything based on feedback from our customers as well. So it's a really cool cycle.
Yeah, you got to eat your own dog food, as they say, right?
Yes.
Yes. So how long have you been there now, Kristin?
I cannot believe it's only been 9 months.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now,
so what are some of the things that surprised you and both, like in a good way and then in a not so good way that you'd like to share? Or not. and by the way, if we were live, going back about 5 minutes when you talked about the lender that you fired in the middle of the process.
Yeah.
Imagine all the comments and questions wanting to know who that lender was.
Oh my gosh. I know. I love that, actually. I try to bring that up often. Like, let me tell you, because I want to have my voice heard here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the things that I think so much has changed in 9 months within our company. We went from social survey to Experience.com. We adopted a new platform. We hired a lot of new people. And so there's so much that's been happening. I think change management has been a huge part of my learning, and learning how to lead in a startup at this level has really been a very, very big learning experience for me. So I think some of the highlights are, for one, I went from at cultural outreach, I worked really hard, but it was a very different type of work, like it was just, I moved straight over from there. I literally signed the closed deal and started at Experience.com or social survey at the time the next week. And it's just been nonstop, just rolling, really fast. So I think for me, learning how to work in that kind of fast-paced environment in a much larger team. I had a team of 5 at Cultural Outreach, and now we've got so many different team members. And that's where it's funny. I said 9 months, and I realized I do feel like I am now, everything's kind of come together. The baby's being born, but because I feel like we've got really good alignment across our departments. And that's a kind of leadership that I hadn't learned before, is making sure that I was syncing regularly with marketing and our BDRs and our product team and these different program leaders, and then each of the AEs, and how to provide the kind of support that each of them need. And so that's been a real journey. And all of the, in the midst of all of this, that product change from the version 1 of the platform to the new one was really challenging. And so I think, everyone felt it, even on the sales team being so far from, I guess not that far, but far from product. Everyone was really putting in a lot of extra effort around that brand and product change. And there were a lot of unforeseen barriers and challenges. And now almost all of those are gone, and we're finally you see the light, and you're oh, okay, this is all for a good reason. I remember now why we did this, and it's all good. But so those are some of the challenges that came with that too.
And I assume, and I haven't heard otherwise, but I assume from a market perspective, it's been pretty positive, both the brand pivot, but also the product pivot. Is that fair to say?
That's a surprising challenge that I did not expect, was that people don't know who Experience.com is, Right. So I think I was telling you that at an event I saw you. I realized people kept saying oh yeah, no, we don't want to use you. We already use social survey. And I'm no, we are social survey. Oh no. Made me realize oh gosh. So we've got our marketing team preparing to have swag that says Experience.com, formerly social survey, for our next events. Cause that's been a real challenge, but very positive overall.
Yeah. And it's amazing that our industry, it's probably like this in any other industry, especially at large events like that. It's not like you guys did this under cloak and dagger. It was, there was a lot of forward leaning press and marketing, but it just goes to show how people just get in their own tunnel, and they don't see outside the blinders, which is amazing.
Well, me too, though. I was in my little hole of we became Experience.com. That's all I see or think about or talk about, and then I meet people and I'm what? How did you not know? But okay, we're in 2 different worlds. That's the whole thing.
Crazy.
So
we got a few minutes left. I want to kind of just have an open-ended question in terms of your experience, both prior to Experience.com and of course over the last 9 months. You see and get to interact with a lot of different lenders of different sizes, different models. What's the trend, if there is a trend happening right now that you see in mortgage lending, whether it's a marketing trend or a consumer segment trend? Is there anything that stands out to you that you think is kind of on that cutting edge right now?
That's a great question, and I hate that I don't know that right now. I think I could make some guesses based on the conversations I've been having, but this is where I have really desperately missed events and live interactions. Like
Yeah.
our calls are very focused on anything related to what we're talking about. So I can share some of that, but otherwise I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone that is going to be at the events over the next few weeks, and to hopefully get more insight into that. But I do think one trend that I've seen is an increase in value for social media and video.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
that is obvious, but just worth saying. Like, I think, a lot of the rules that companies previously had around social media have been loosened up a bit, and there's better guidelines around that and better tools and content that companies are sharing. So I think that's one area. I think there's a lot in the wholesale channel as well, that's happening around providing brokers with the resources that they need from the wholesale lenders. So that's been interesting. And then, a lot in automation, just in general, marketing automation. And, but there's a lot of tools in that space too. So, including both of ours, I guess, but yeah, what are you seeing? Anything in particular?
Yeah. In my view of things right now may be slightly, biased because of just the nature of the product that we have, but our engagements and some of the, I've been to 2 conferences here in the last 30 days. And so there's definitely from my perspective, I see a focus on getting up the funnel, further up the funnel earlier in a consumer's journey. I don't know what all those answers are yet, how to do that, but people are, especially the forward-leaning lenders that we're talking to, understand, who the market leaders are in mortgage, right? You don't have to go too far from where I live in Detroit to figure out who they are. And how do I, as a lender, an independent mortgage banker, stay relevant and get up the funnel far enough where I can beat some of these other, billion-dollar in marketing and advertising platforms. So from our perspective, we see this desire to get up the funnel and engage consumers much earlier in their home ownership journey. There's a fascinating trend towards just digging deeper into consumer data and understanding what consumers' needs are from their data, right? And they create data all over the place, but so there's a lot of people focused on that. And again, I don't know what the final answers are, but I think the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see some cool things come out of some of these forward-leaning lenders who are trying to engage consumers much earlier in the process and build a trusting, valued relationship, and then hopefully that pays off in the form of a transaction for the lender and maybe a long-term relationship. But then, and this is where we started with your definition on fintech, is helping consumers be more empowered with their own data and give them tools to use that leverage their data instead of their data being leveraged against them by somebody else.
Yes, totally. I want to add to that because I love that you brought up the consumer data piece, not just because we focus in that area, but it has been really interesting because just a few years ago, people were only thinking about their outward brand. And so, do you have a review automation system? Do you, that type of stuff? Now it's like, do you collect customer feedback? And is that something that you're analyzing, and really listening to that? But I think what is also interesting is that one thing over the last year I've been hearing in terms of when people hire me for webinars or events, the topics that they're asking for, I am loving, because I have one topic that's on the psychology of money, and it's like understanding, next gen home buyers, but also how we relate to money and financial decisions. And that psychology piece has been requested many times lately. And so I'm really excited because that means that people actually are thinking like, okay, I need to understand what my consumers are thinking, what my borrowers are thinking, what my employees are thinking. And that's building empathy. And I think it's a really interesting place to be in. And I also think and hope that we're coming to a place where we're understanding that consumers still need to build a lot. There's a huge trust gap. I mean, we're about to release a next gen homebuyer report that we did a bunch of research on next-gen home buyers, and they do not trust lenders or banks, financial institutions, and we need to fill that gap. But in order to do that, you have to build the empathy with the customer. So I think that we're getting closer to that, and focusing on understanding the customer is really key.
Yeah, I love all that. I can't wait for that report. Some of the work you've done over the years in that area it's super helpful for our industry, and I applaud your efforts in that space specifically. So let's wrap it up here with a last question, and this one's just kind of more for the audience that doesn't already know Kristin, just to get to know you a little bit better. What do you like to do when you're not running on this crazy mortgage treadmill?
Yeah, it's a really long treadmill right now, but I think I love climbing, and that's actually something that is a brand new hobby to me. I started it when COVID hit last year, I've climbed in gyms before, but I went on outdoor trips, and I love it so much. If anyone is interested, I mean, the outdoor climbing in particular, because my first climb, I actually cried after, not out of fear, just like, I was just so emotional because it was so ecstatic. But it also was, I think, what led me to decide to sell my business, because I have all these realizations around like, oh, if I shift my weight and I'm just looking for that next thing to climb to, like you have to move up, whatever. But it's, I find it very rewarding. So I'm going to another climbing class tonight. So.
Awesome. Well, enjoy. And I'm more of an escalator guy myself. So I don't have, my fingers aren't strong enough to grip and hold on the climb. So, but that's awesome. That's cool. And you can climb anywhere, right? There's pretty much every place you go, there's somewhere you can climb.
That's true. Yeah, exactly.
So fun.
I think,
Kristin, this has been go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm discovering climbers all over the industry, and how they have like the ski club or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to start a climbing one. So
yeah,
everyone listening, let me know.
There you go. Drop her a note. Well, this has been a blast as always. Thanks for joining me. Obviously, if folks want to learn more about Experience.com, they can go to Experience.com. Imagine that. I'm sure they can hit you up on LinkedIn. But thank you again for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for all that you're doing.
Thank you.